to the HCW YouTube channel, and welcome back to another Indie Spotlight. And no, this is not a Kamikaze Pro live review. This is an Indie Spotlight on Alex Connors, just Alex Connors. We're just going to talk about Alex Connors, but how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm very good. It's very early on a Sunday, which means we're both very tired after a few nights of wrestling shows, as we always do on a Friday and Saturday. But thankfully, there's none today, so we can take our time and chill.
Yeah, and luckily you're the ever professional where you wrestle, whereas I drink. So it's a bit worse for me.
But you were at a show last night, so
Yeah.
you're equally as tired.
Yeah, it was a fantastic show. But anyway, for anyone that's watched this Indie Spotlights before, it's pretty much a rip-off of This Is Your Life. We'll discuss Alex, how he got into wrestling all the way up into being the Kamikaze Pro Live champion. So, what was your kind of first wrestling memory? Like, what kind of got you into wrestling?
I can remember the very first match I saw vividly. I got into wrestling pretty late on. I was sort of an early teen, which I think for most people is quite late. But for me, it was probably a huge advantage because when I first saw wrestling, I immediately understood all the ingredients that went into it. I understood I was watching an athlete, a comedian, a storyteller, a charismatic person just as much as a brawler. And I never had any false illusions about how many different skill sets were involved, which was incredible. And I remember the first match I ever saw was Taz versus Christian. And there was some story where Edge and Christian were afraid of Taz and they were changing the matches around so they didn't have to face him. But then the Hardys changed it back. And it was very funny, very entertaining. And I was pretty much hooked straight away. But it does mean, despite everyone thinking I'm quite the wrestling nerd, most of my wrestling nerddom comes from watching things in retrospect. I was not there at the height of the Monday Night Wars or ECW. I was very much 2002, 2003 when I first sort of started watching.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, like, I'm very much the same, as in, like, I was there technically Attitude Era, but also I don't remember any of it when I was that young, because I was only probably about 9. You know, so I don't remember what was happening. And then when did you decide, like, you'd start, like, giving it a go training-wise?
Oh, so we moved house quite a lot when I was younger, and one time we moved to a beautiful town called Hinckley, which has absolutely nothing in it. So I didn't know anyone, and I had nothing to do, so I'd just go into Leicester, the closest city, and walk around and see what was there. And I walked past a warehouse. In fact, my mum actually walked past this warehouse and told me, go back and take a look. And the shutter was up, and there was a wrestling ring in, and they were training. And I couldn't believe that people actually could be training in my local city. And I thought, well, I probably might meet some friends and have something to do on a weekend, because I didn't know anyone or anything like that. So I thought, I'll show up next weekend, and that's what I did.
Okay, and who was what company was doing the training at that point?
That was Wrestle Leicester, which was Robbie Brookside's training school. For those who don't know, Robbie was my original trainer. So this is a long time ago, back in 2008 to 12. And Robbie was a legend of World of Sport, of British Pro Wrestling, of the independent scene. He obviously went to NXT and became a head trainer there. And even before then, he'd helped out a lot at the Texas Wrestling Academy or Shawn Michaels School. So the guest trainers he would bring in were unbelievable at the time. Bryan Danielson, Nigel McGuinness, they all stopped by and helped out. And it was an incredible first 4 years. Robbie was extremely strict, so there's not a lot of shows. If you look and I'm sure you've scoured Cage Match before this, you'll find we probably did 2 shows a year, if that. And that is because Robbie was a perfectionist. You trained for a year before you got on a show, absolutely minimum. And that was all British style, technical style, and all those matches that I had in those first 4 years would have all been just free-flowing, chained together in the ring, no plan whatsoever, just get out there and perform.
Yeah, and obviously, to the luck of having someone as good as Robbie Brookside as your first trainers, very much walk past him and then see it, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
So, do you remember your first match?
Yeah, it was against somebody called CK Light, who had wrestled on a lot of the local independents, and he was hugely helpful to me despite being my opponent. Really, really just nice and helpful guy. And I do remember we fell for maybe something of an old school British prank, or whether or not this was just Robbie Brookside. But I was told this match would have a 10-minute time limit, and I thought, okay, if I can just stretch out CK and go to the limit, that would be a great first performance. Most people probably don't win their very, very first match ever. And we get to the ring, and Robbie Brookside is the announcer for his own show, looking very dapper, suited up. We get to the ring, and he says that this match will be a 15-minute time limit, giving me 5 extra minutes to fill if I want to stretch CK Light out to a time limit draw. So my very, very first match went a full 15 minutes. I was successful in stretching CK out. Don't think I was ever close to beating him, but I survived, which I think was my main goal back then.
Yeah, and all that matters, you didn't lose, which is always nice in a first match, not to lose to someone experienced as CK Light. And through them wrestle years, you got to wrestle a few like well-known people from what other people know now. How was it like wrestling people like James Mason and Jack Stars?
Oh yeah, so 2 totally different answers here. So Jack was part of the class. I You probably only got maybe one-on-one match and one tag match on a show back then. But I locked up with him 100 times a year. We knew each other like the back of our hands. Whereas James Mason was a British legend who came in and basically helped trial by fire the students every once in a while. And I was very lucky. I think I was one of the first people on a Wrestle Leicester show to wrestle him, which showed great faith in Rob for myself. And I learned loads. But I think you learn both aspects because you want to have someone who you know really well and you grow up together and you've got a rivalry. And you also want to step into the ring with someone who's been around decades longer than you, who can show you how it's done. And amazingly, I got to have a one-on-one match with James Mason last year, again, almost 12 or 13 years after the first one. And I would have thought how much more well-prepared and how much better I was in the ring until I got into the ring with him in 2023 and found he was still so fast, so sound, so smooth. He's one of the best English wrestlers of all time. TNA, WWE, he's been on every single promotion you can think of. So it was an honour back then, but equally it was an honour in 2023.
Yeah, and that was at Fallout, wasn't it? Full Force, is it?
Yeah. Full Force Fallout. And I also wrestled him at UKWA. So 3 times I managed to get into the ring with him, and each one was a whole new level of learning experience. And I just want to tell a quick James Mason story, if I could.
Yeah, no, definitely.
One time I showed up to help out a show. A lot of wrestlers will know this, a lot of fans may not, but when you're new and you're trying to get on a show, you might show up early and help set the ring up. And I was the only person to show up, and James Mason and me carried his ring up 2 flights of stairs, set it up. It was a big show, fantastic show, went fantastically well. I wasn't on it. I was newer at the time, and I would eventually get on it. So this is a success story. And at the end, James said, "Oh, are you the ring crew? You know, how much are they paying you?" Because I'd taken it down, just me and him. And I said, "No, I'm just trying to, get a good name out there, pay my dues, as it were."
Yeah.
And he paid me for the day, which is like the nicest thing I think anyone in wrestling has ever done. Because that's his money. It's his ring job. He's earned it. That's his income. He is a wrestler full time. And he paid me for the day because I was the only person who'd helped out, even though the promoter and the show didn't. So always indebted to James Mason in and out the ring. I think he's absolutely fantastic.
And there's nothing worse than carrying a ring, let alone up a flight of stairs, like
Horrific.
The Midway in when Kamikaze. There used to be like a spiral kind of, so you go up that way and you had to turn, and it was horrible, absolutely horrible. And then, so as you mentioned, Wrestle Leicester were very like niches and like they didn't have many shows a year. You took a bit of a break, it looks like, unless I'm mistaken, for about 5 years or so until you popped up again. What happened there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was obsessed with making wrestling my full-time job, going to WWE or New Japan. As I got into wrestling quite late, I understood the whole universe. I was really excited by New Japan, Ring of Honor. And I actually moved to the United States to try to achieve this dream. And when it didn't pan out, and I also realized maybe it wasn't the dream that I wanted, because I didn't want to get battered 300 times a year and not walk by the age I was 40. And wrestlers seemed to have a very low life expectancy back then, and they were all crippled. And so I realized if I didn't want it to be my 300 days a year job, then I would just give up entirely. And that's what I did. I set up my own business. I eventually sold that business, bought this house. I lived in Rochester, New York for a bit. I lived in a few different places in England for a bit, just trying to settle down and live a normal life. Completely forgot about wrestling, to be honest.
Okay, and what brought you back?
So, in 2017, one of my friends actually wanted to start wrestling again. And this is one of those sliding door moments, one of those time tree moments. He said, please come along to the first few sessions, because you know what you're doing, to make me feel more comfortable. You just do a month until I settle in and I meet people and I'm happy. And then you can piss off again if you don't want to. And I said, yeah, fine. Bit of exercise, bit of fun, bit of nostalgia. So I showed up with my friend. We did a month. He stopped. I carried on. The exact opposite happened. And I was completely hooked again. And I realized that maybe I could just do it when I wanted, take the shows I wanted, wrestle where I wanted, and still really feel fulfilled by it. It didn't have to be 300 days a year, but actually 80, 100 times a year is a pretty well-paying hobby and a pretty fun one. So, I thought I'd give it another go.
Okay, and was that CPW?
Yeah, so that was Commentary Pro Wrestling. And honestly, I think that's where I spent the next sort of 3 years, almost, till 2020. And it was a very... I mean, you've probably had people come on here and complain about Commentary Pro Wrestling. I'm going to shoot right down the middle. There are some real horror stories. It's definitely not a place I'd recommend because it's got a little bit of a insular cultist vibe. They very much keep themselves to themselves, and they don't like people getting success. So if you're a trainee, terrible place to go. But they have a very loyal, very rabid crowd, and they run regular shows. So they gave me loads of opportunities. They increased my experience massively. I ended up winning, I think, every single prize I could win. I was their longest reigning champ. I'd won all the other belts, and I got loads of chances and opportunities to perform in front of a rabid crowd, which you can never, ever complain about. So I've got to always be thankful for that. Of all the places I went to a place that gave me lots of chances, which I appreciate. It was a disorganized, unprofessional mess, which eventually I would leave for some of those behaviours. So yeah, I'm right down the middle. I'm thankful I got to go somewhere that ran really regularly to a rabid crowd, but I wouldn't recommend it as a wrestler or a fan, if I'm honest, because being insular means you're not getting some of the best outside talent in, and it means you're not letting your students see all these other promotions and improve themselves, and it means the quality of the performers isn't as high as a lot of shows that I've seen since. But at the time, it was just a hobby to me, so it didn't really matter.
Yeah, and I think with things like CPW and some few other places, I think like the insular kind of thing, people get a bit of an ego where they think they're better than they are, and then obviously they're a big fish in a small pond, but then they go out, and then they're a small fish in a massive pond. First match you can see here, which we won't go through your whole CPW because that'll be a while. Was it against Fifi or FIFI? Yeah. Is that how it's pronounced?
Fifi, yeah, Fifi. It was. It was outside. It was, and this is. I think there's a few eras here to my career when I view it in my own head, because Wrestle Leicester and Robbie Brookside was classic British technical wrestling.
Yeah.
And Commentary Pro Wrestling was this brawling Attitude Era style wrestling, which completely meant I had to add loads more strikes to my game, loads more brawling, viciousness, aggressiveness. At Wrestle Leicester, you could do a fancy wrist lock reversal to a huge round of applause. That wouldn't get you anywhere at Commentary Pro Wrestling. You brawled, you had hardcore matches, you had Attitude Era chaos. and drama and intrigue. And I had to learn how to handle a brawling style. And that was my first one. It was a fine match, nothing to complain about. I would go on to have a few good rivalries there. They do have Will Starr, that was a good rivalry. Tomby, that was a good rivalry. And also met George Lydon and had a huge rivalry there. And also a place where I would meet Lucia Lee, who would become quite influential, those two, later on for where they would end up.
Yeah, definitely. And I wanted to bring up now, because I've never heard you speak about it before, the Connors family. How did that come about?
Yeah, so when we showed up at Coventry Pro Wrestling, I actually had a bunch of friends to begin with, and the Connors family was the Temple of Light, but more rugged, without the style. It was still very fervent, very religious. We, again, as we always have, believed we were the good guys who were trying to show people the right way to do things. People didn't always agree with it, but a lot of people don't with modern day religion and being told when they're morally incorrect. But the Connors family would morph quite rapidly into something called the Deep South and finally the Coalition, where I think it would really stabilize. And that's where I'd meet Harley Harris. I had Lenny Lynch, and those two are people who still wrestle all over the Midlands now. And Lenny is obviously still part of the Temple of Light to this day. And he was in Wrestle Leicester, and he's someone I've known for 15 years, Lenny Lynch. So he's pretty much always been by my side. Yeah, I think you see the seeds of faction, leader, and Temple of Light, but just in a more rugged exterior.
Yeah, and I wanted to kind of sideways glance at this because you brought it up yesterday when we were speaking about this prior. I didn't know you had any kind of link to Harley Harris, let alone being in a coalition with her.
Yeah, it was a hugely successful faction. I had the main belt, like I said, a longest running champ. My understudy, my minion, had their barracks or trainee belt, and Harley had the women's belt. And then we had a tag team going after the tag team belt. I don't think they quite held it at the same time as us, unfortunately, but 3 belts among 5 people is a hugely successful faction. Myself and Harley teamed together for a long time at Coventry Pro Wrestling.
Okay, and your first title at Coventry was their tag team championship, wasn't it? Well, I think it was that your
Yeah.
first ever championship at that point.
Yeah, it was. Coventry Pro Wrestling tag titles with Lenny Lynch. That was actually his first ever match at Coventry Pro Wrestling, which shows the faith that they had in to give us that opportunity. And then I won every belt I think that they had available to me at the time. I think there was the Next Gen belt, which was for the up and comers, and then there was the green one, Galaxy belt, which was a very interesting match. So I won that in a mixed tag. Lucia Lee was the defending champion.
You did, yeah.
She was teaming with CJ Rawlings. So I pinned CJ Rawlings to win a belt off Lucia Lee. A very quirky result on cage match for sure.
If you look at that match now, though, 4 years later, you look at it, everyone in that match is great. So that's a good match.
Yeah. So you see me teaming with Harley Harris there, and crazy match to think of in retrospect.
Yeah.
And then eventually I'd win their main championship, their big belt.
Yeah, to which you held for 53 days, according to this.
Yeah. And one thing I did very proud of, one of the smallest details here, is each time I'd won a belt, I held it for longer than I'd ever held any belt.
That's a good stat.
Yeah, and it is actually still true.
Yeah,
even post CPW. Yeah, so I got much better at understanding the pressure and rigors of being a champion and having that top high-end performance every single time. When you are a champ, you're expected to put on a top-level match every time someone sees you. And you can see I got much better at it. I had a very short reign for my first ever belt, and every single belt I've won since, I've had a longer reign, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think, just not saying we should cheat here, but I think you should put that as a Wrestle Connect question. I do like that stat. And then you branched out to a place where you're a regular now. Hinckley, how did that come about, wrestling in Hinckley?
Yeah, so TJ Sky, who runs wrestling in Hinckley, he actually was redacted. One of the original trainers. He's actually the person who helped me stay at Cov Pro Wrestling to begin with. He was one of their trainers until him and Jason Joshua, another one of my regular running buddies, had a huge fallout with Cov Pro Wrestling, as almost every wrestler I've ever met has eventually had a huge falling
Rite
out
of
with Cov Pro
passage.
Wrestling. Yeah, it seems to be the way, the career path. And so I still wanted to see those guys. I got on really well with those two. I was really invested in, they're super talented people, as you know, both
Yeah.
TJ Sky and Jason Joshua. So despite the huge falling out between the two sides, I was going to keep it professional and I was going to go wrestle them somewhere else. And Wrestling in Hinckley happened to be the place. So we started the health and safety faction there. Again, it was still the same message, the morally correct message, which we've always had, but just a little bit more entertaining, because Wrestling in Hinckley is a family show and we wanted to make sure that message seeped through to the kids. And it's been really fun. I love Wrestling in Hinckley. It's the one closest to where I actually live, and it's run by great people. Tom is TJ, Thomas James Sky. He's just a helpful guy. He's lovely.
Yeah,
Apart
no,
from
well, there is a bit of it, but wrestling-wise, he's great. Person, maybe not. No, he's fine. But yeah, as I mentioned, we're going to bring up health and safety and stuff like that. I do like that you have a message of, obviously, outside of family-friendly shows, it's kind of like we can spurt as much as we want, but family-friendly, let's make it kid-friendly, but still spurt the same message. I like it.
Yeah. The coalition, the Temple of Light, health and safety, it's the same thing. It's all, we are here to show you guys how to be morally correct. And it started at Coventry Pro Wrestling because they have a very drunk, disorderly, and morally bankrupt fan base. We needed to enlighten them. And it just carried on. It's the same message everywhere we go, just in a different package sometimes to try and target the audience we see.
Okay. I feel like I'm the exception proves the rule with you. I'm a drunk mess, but I mean, just keep one with you. And then, so at that point, I just wanted to bring up a match because it would just really confuse me what it might be. You might be able to like, what the hell is a hillbilly's chicken run?
Oh, it was quite simply a gauntlet match.
Oh, okay.
That was maybe my first real feud. It was Danny O'Neill, I believe.
Yeah.
He's the opponent there. And it was him trying to run through every member of the family, with me being the last one left. But obviously, by the time he reaches me, he might be a little bit more worn out and worse for wear. Yeah, I really enjoyed having some long-running feuds. I've got a lot of... When you enter independent pro wrestling, if you're new, you're probably not going to actually have any rivals. You'd like to, but you're probably going to drop in, have a match, a scramble, a six-man, a tag match. You're probably not going to see somebody one-on-one over and over again. And Danny O'Neill was probably the first person that I got to do that with at Cov, but then it would be George, Tom B, Will Starr, Morgan Black, and I really enjoyed when you wrestle somebody multiple times and those matches just get better and better every time.
Yeah, definitely. And then you mentioned a few of them, because of the people you would see kamikaze-wise now. People like Man Like the Reese travelled for CPW as well, it looks like.
Yeah, that show was the show you're referring to. The first time I ever wrestled Doris one-on-one was a very unique show. The ring was in a basketball court.
Okay.
And it was in the centre of a block of flats. And the fans were on the balcony of the flats, looking down into the basketball court.
Sounds like a game. It sounds like like a fight for New York. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, you'd imagine it as a Tekken arena,
yeah.
for sure. Absolutely nowhere to change.
And then people wouldn't know, as you mentioned, obviously you fought George a lot prior to the kamikaze rivalry that's heating up at the moment. George, at this point, like I'm looking at it, he 2018, so that's 6 years ago. He would have been 14 at this point. It's been insane, George Lloyd.
Yeah, I think when I finally had enough of Cov Pro, it wasn't worth being a hobby for the amount of stress they'd cause, and they did something very unprofessional towards my girlfriends, and I thought, I'm just out of here. I'm just going to leave this hobby behind. It's caused me too much stress. Hand the title back. I was still the champion at the time, and just leave. George Lydon and Lucia Lee were the two people who had sort of, again, already fallen out, as everyone does, but they were the two who told me, actually you are good enough if you believed in yourself. A lot of these cult like shows don't like you to believe in yourself because you might go
Yeah.
to other places. If you believe in yourself and you get yourself out there, you'll actually have a great time. And they convinced me to start trying other places. And obviously, Cami being one of those places, because that's where those two had found a new home.
Yeah. And then the rest is history with you and George, which we'll bring on a bit later. At that point, you were kind of wrestling between CPW and Hinckley with a few shots at like NBWA, a place I was completely lost. In my Elevation as well, you were at one point as well in a Rumble. How was it like branching away from like CPW, as in like getting out?
Yeah, it was really hard at that time because they ran so frequently and they really didn't like you going to other places. So it was very tough, but I still wanted to be the best professional wrestler I could be. I didn't just want to face the same group of people because you don't really learn. You don't get a lot better by just facing the same opponents week in, week out. You've got to get out there and see new styles. And so that was my attempt. I wanted to see a new vision, and I knew I pretty much achieved everything I could there, but I didn't really gain any traction. And absolutely no fault of the promotions I visited.
Yeah.
I didn't have a lot of free time, and I wasn't really in a place where I could develop beyond what I was doing at COF because I was there so frequently. So, not just shows, their training school, helping out at their training school, the amount of time they demanded from you was unreal. You'd be there 4 evenings a week, you'd set up a show for 12 to 16 hours, you'd leave at 10 a.m., you'd get back at 2 a.m. And so I didn't have the time to commit myself. So other shows would give me the chance, Elevation, New Breed, New Star, but no fault of their own. I don't think I was adding that much to their shows at the time.
No, that's fair. And last thing about CPW is because it was a big start of your career. You lost a loser leaves CPW match, but it was like the Godfather. They tried to get you out, but you were still there.
Yeah.
What Polo Vela?
Yeah, so this is something that I was very proud of at the time, and it really shapes what we see today. So I did lose a loser leaves to Lenny Lynch,
Yeah.
a match where the crowd actually came up to the side of the ring and bashed the mat and gave us a huge standing ovation. I'm really proud to have wrestled someone who I've known that long.
Yeah.
Frustratingly, and this is a weird stat as well, I think most people, me and Lenny Lynch broke in together. We teamed at Wrestle Leicester. We teamed at Cov Pro. I think most people would say they know me better, not being arrogant, but I've definitely broken out
Yeah.
higher and performed better. But I've never beaten Lenny Lynch one-on-one. He always beats me, which is another crazy stat. So he beats me in this loser leaves town. Yeah. He beats me in this loser leaves town. Fantastic match, one of my favourites of my whole career. Crowds go crazy. They're up at the edge of the ring, banging the ring apron. But I had nowhere else to go at the time. So I return under a mask. And this does a bunch of things. Number one, this is not I'm under a mask and the crowd are all in on the joke. No, because eventually I'd earn my job back and I would wrestle twice on every Cov Pro show and no one would know that it was me twice. I was completely covered head to toe.
Yeah.
Apollo Vela threw kicks, Alex Connors threw knee strikes. Apollo Vela was right-handed, Alex Connors was left-handed. I wanted to make sure nobody knew that it was me, and we did a lot of things to keep that completely under wraps. And eventually, the style of those two would combine into the me that we see post-Cov. And that's both in my wrestling and in my attire. In fact, if you see early Apollo Vela pictures, they look far more like the Inquisitor than early Alex Connors pictures do. But it also gave me a chance. Yeah, 100%. And I'd merge the two looks together after. But it also gave me a chance to work really creative. I had a manager there, Dominic DeWinter, with a big creative mind. And it really helped me. Apollo Vela couldn't speak because people would know it was me.
Yeah,
so it helped me work on all these creative ways to do promos and to get into new buildings and places, which I think is really more prevalent in how the Temple of Light is so much more stylistic and I think cool compared to the Coalition.
Yeah, definitely. And we get to a point at this point where the pandemic happened. How was the pandemic for you? Because obviously US wrestling, they could continue, but we had to kind of shut down completely for a few months at least.
Yeah, but that didn't stop COV Pro Wrestling. We still ran shows. I was told that they checked with the council and they were all legal. Whether or not that was true. We would run shows with no fans, just cameras, stationary cameras. You'd be locked in a room until your match. It was a weird dystopian experience to wrestle in complete silence. But I, again, think it was a really good experience because I'd have to learn how to structure my match without having to rely on anything you could hear.
Yeah,
These would just be done.
Completely different.
Yeah, completely different. Total silence.
I'm assuming they've got some kind of on-demand service because it seems weird that you'd be doing no fan shows. It was.
Yeah, they have a Patreon. In fact, you have to pay for that. Even if you're one of their wrestlers, you don't get to watch your own matches back, which is something that's never a great sign because you need to watch your own matches back to improve.
That's not
but they have
the best business model. Yeah, awful.
Always a red flag. But yeah, we'd perform in front of stationary cameras, like one in each corner, and someone would be out of the back of the room, cutting between those cameras. You'd see nobody, but you'd still wrestle, which is a totally unique experience. And again, as much as I complain about the disorganization or the unprofessionalism, great opportunity to learn your craft without having to rely on some of the stuff that give you the big clues about what's working and what's not working. Perform your craft in silence, but still to 100%, and still learn your rhythms and your tempos. It was a really unique experience. And it did a few things for me that I think really helped. Because when I left Coventry Pro Wrestling, I was one of the few people who was still in ring shape because I'd wrestled the whole time.
Working like a dog. Yeah.
And a lot of people had moved or given up the hobby or the dream or the career. Some people who were full-time still thought when the pandemic came along, I'll call it here. Mm-hmm. So I got a huge boost by being able to approach promotions post the pandemic and say, I'm ready. I'm in ring shape. I'm fresh. I'm new. I'm ready to go right now. And a lot of the people that they had weren't coming back.
Yeah, like I spoke to Alton Thorne, brought that up. That he said, like, when he was pandemic, obviously he didn't get to wrestle in the first match he had. He said he was gassed, absolutely gassed after a few minutes, just felt ruined.
So imagine you go to a first show back, you're super excited, and all these promotions who've never seen me before, and I'm the only person who puts on
going around like Bret Hart.
Everyone else has not been able to train, and obviously they're great wrestlers. It's just nothing prepares you for being in the ring other than being in the ring. I remember I had an injury once, and I would still work out, and I could run for an hour, not lose my breath. You get in the ring 5 minutes later, you're done. It's just a totally different type of exercise. So I was the only person in ring shape on a lot of these shows coming back, and I was the only person who was ready to go at a peak level, which was great for me because I was appearing on most of these shows for the very first time.
Yeah. So at this point, we kind of normally have a break, but because you wrestled during it, we're going to have to segue a different way. So we normally ask questions like, but I don't know what you're into music-wise. You're a music fan?
Yeah, I think you'll find that wrestling is my one and only true passion. I don't do anything in my life that isn't, in some way, a love of wrestling. I am obsessed. It is my one and only passion. If we've got some mad editing skills, I would flash up a few images of the DVD collection at this point.
Oh yeah, no, that I've got that kind of editing skills. I thought you were going about live now. I was like, no, that ain't
happening. no. I'll send some over post.
I remember
stick them on, bang, bang, bang.
Yeah.
I'm an avid DVD collector for pro wrestling. But music-wise, it's just background for me. I'm not passionate about any music. I'm not passionate about any TV. I'm a bit of a board gamer. That filled a lot of the pandemic. Yeah. I'm quite a board gamer, which might be obvious to those who recognise some of my gear. But outside of that, anyone who knows me in any aspect of my life, even if they know me personally, knows I'm obsessed with wrestling.
Okay, so normally we'd put someone on the spot with music-wise, which we can't do. So, top 3 board games.
Top 3 board games. Great question. Let's go countdown, reverse order. Number 3. We're just talking strictly board games here. Ticket to Ride.
Yeah, that.
Number
Yeah,
3.
yeah.
Ticket to Ride is very easy to play for everyone. You can pick it up with literally anyone. It's really fun. It's just one of the classics that gets people invested. But for me, it's the best one of the classics that you can introduce to anyone.
Yeah, my mate got me. We played it together. Well, I'd never played it before, and yeah, it was really simple to pick up. Yeah.
Yeah, I tried to play all of the Ticket to Rides in the country that they are set. So I'll buy a ticket to ride, go on holiday to that place, and play it, which is a fun quest.
Yeah, no. Side mission.
Yeah.
It's good.
There are so many others I'd love to shout up, but I'll go with number 2, probably being the one that we actually get the most fun out of and we play the most frequently, Mysterium. It's a cooperative game where you're trying to figure out who murdered a ghost, but the ghost can't speak, they can only talk in pictures. And so you're trying to figure out what those pictures mean. Have you ever played Dixit by the same people? A bit more popular.
I have not. No, I've just had a look at Mysterium. I've seen the board game. I've never played it. Yeah.
Yeah. So Dixit, one person is murdered. They're a ghost. They cannot speak for the rest of the game, and they have a bunch of art cards. And you're trying to ask them questions. Who was the murderer? What room were you murdered? What weapon? And when you ask those questions, all they can do is give you one of these art cards. And you're thinking, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that it's this room because it has this in it? Or does that mean it's that room because it's that colour? Fantastic. It's a cooperative, really fun.
Does look good. Yeah.
I bought it once for just a Halloween night of gaming, and we got absolutely addicted to it. A real blast.
It's nothing better when you buy something randomly and then it goes well. I've watched No Rolls Barred play it. I was trying to remember if I've seen. Yeah, I remember the images. Yeah.
Yeah, really love it. And number 1, I'm gonna have to say the Isle of Cats.
Waiting for Monopoly then.
I'll get aggressive if anyone tries to make me play Monopoly.
Everyone does.
I very rarely lose my calm, even in the ring, but if you try and get me to play Monopoly, I'll be furious. Yeah, Isle of Cats, it's a Tetris sort of style game where you're trying to fit as many cats as you can onto a boat to rescue them. Artwork is stunning, but the gameplay is really fun as well. You can play it with anyone, but it does get a bit more strategic and a bit more in depth. And yeah, I found it at UK Games Expo, wandered around, sampled hundreds of games. I found a few that I love, but none that I fell in love with quite as hard as Isle of Cats.
It's visually nice, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I've been to quite a few UK Games Expos, but never before have I played a game, sat down, played the game, and just gone, take all of my money. I want every single version of this you have. I want every expansion. I want all of this right now. It's all coming home with me immediately. And then we'll play nothing but that for weeks.
This is my life now.
Yeah.
But the question is Sonny Noss a cat?
Sonny Noss is obviously not a cat. He wouldn't fit in Isle of Cats. He wouldn't tetromino into the shape of a cat because he's a human.
Well, yeah, I don't know, because he doesn't have a tail, so therefore that's gone. So that's.
But if anybody has more board game related questions, I've got hundreds of other answers. There's loads of games I feel bad for not mentioning then in the top 3.
It's the trouble, isn't
loads
it?
Yeah. It is. It's hard. I'm going to keep myself to 3. I'm not going to say any more. But if anyone's a board game fan, drop me a message and we'll talk board games because I do enjoy.
Yeah, I try and go. Me and my mate, we try and go around. Well, I'll go around his house because he's got like kind of set up yours, so we try and do it once a month. We played one called Art Society, which was very, very fun. And then obviously you've got the one called with the horror monsters, like the Universal monsters. I can't remember what it's called now. It's going to annoy me.
I was just about to say it, and it's Unmatched.
Unmatched, is it? I don't think that's the Universal Monsters board game. can't remember what it's called. It's going to annoy me because you have an American. Horrified. That's the one.
Oh, Horrified.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the one. That's very, very good. Anyway, we should get back to, so we've got some questions. One which I've not shown you, which is just one that pops up on everyone anyway. A movie of Alex Connors. Who would play Alex Connors? And it can't be Alex Connors.
I would say I'm just going to give it to a great actor who can do any role, right? I'm not going to say
De Niro?
If you pick somebody attractive, you think you're going to be attractive, you're trying to sound cocky. If you pick somebody older than you or younger than you, you're going to say a message. I'm just going to pick someone who I think can do everything because they've done everything, and then people can just mold it to me. I'd say Christian Bale is a great actor who can do absolutely anything. So let's say Christian Bale.
Yeah, he's very good at kind of changing his style up as well. If you're going to pick anyone to do it, from a machinist to Batman, it's insane.
Exactly. So not saying anything about me. You can make of me what you will, and Christian Bale will still be able to achieve it.
So confirmed here, Alex is Batman. So we've had a few questions in from a lot of them from the Kamikaze guys, I believe. So we've got CJ, I believe his name is Callan Houston. He's went, why do you hate Carl so much? That's a fantastic question, that is.
Well, if you have to ask, you've obviously not been paying attention. For a solid year at Kamikaze, nobody has pinned George Lydon except me.
Mm-hmm.
To the mat, 1, 2, 3, bell rung, belt raised, and Carl reversed that decision. Ridiculous. I've never seen that happen any other match. I've seen people use far dirtier tactics. I've seen people cheat, get away with it time after time, right in front of Carl's eyes. And for whatever transgression he thinks I have done, the match gets restarted. And then he lets George have his pick of the favourite new trainees to beat. None of this is against George. He's obviously a fantastic competitor. And I mentioned on our last review, I'm a huge fan and supporter of George. But the way Carl ran that show and let George be his favourite and let him get away, restarting a match because he lost, ridiculous.
He's not followed that principle since, though, has he? People have cheated since and it's not been restarted. You know, Carl out. Technically, he already is. Anyway, he's running stuff behind the scenes, though. He's still dodgy. Talking of Carl asked you a question. I bet you're looking forward to this question. Carl asked, seeing as he's your favourite GM, where's your Kamikaze Pro Live title? That's his question.
Well, it seems to be that my Pro Live title is still around the waist of a pretender, thanks to you, Carl. Now, luckily, I've got a room full of belts right through that door there, and I don't need every single belt in the whole UK to be happy. I've got plenty of other titles from companies that are far more reputable and didn't reverse the decision.
There you go, Carl. That's why you're not manager at the moment. And we've got one from Dylan, I believe. Top favourite gimmicks in wrestling right now?
Ooh, interesting. I'm going to completely ignore the question and talk about my favourite gimmicks of all time, because focusing on the right now, I think, is a huge mistake that wrestlers make, because you can learn loads from the past and you can learn things that people have just forgotten or aren't doing. So I'm just going to talk about some of my favourite gimmicks of all time, shall we?
Yeah.
Neo Bishtigun from Tokyo Joshi Pro. Incredible gimmick. Absolutely fantastic. Gothic French Renaissance era vibe, but also this, I don't know if you're much of a comic book fan, Rate?
I dabble. I know of people, but I probably haven't read them.
Yeah. Do you know of Apocalypse in X-Men, a villain who steals X-Men to be his horseman?
I've heard of it. Yeah, once again, I probably wouldn't know much in depth of it. Yeah.
So Neo Bishtigun do something very similar. They have a serum that turns your favorite wrestlers into completely different versions of themselves under the Neo Bishtigun.
I saw that on the they had a bar show, didn't they? Recently, yeah, because I saw a version of that. Yeah. Just for yourself, Ray, while you
clearly having a bit of a Google, just Google Hyper Missile and Missile Neo Vishtigun and just look at the difference.
Yeah, Hyper Missile I'm
So,
aware of.
yeah, so Missile Neo Vishtigun,
Yeah, good grief.
and you'll just get two just unrecognizably different personas. And I love the story that creates immediately of heroes trying to rescue their friend from this new, darker version of themselves. And they're just a fantastic stable. They have one unified image, but within that image, everyone stands out and looks unique, which I think is just what you need from a stable.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the head of the faction, Saki-sama, retired last year, so that's why it's not my favorite gimmick right now, because they are no longer together. But I will bring up a few others while I'm at it. The Colony, who performed originally on Chikara, but I believe they have a match coming up, so they are not fully dead, so they are probably one of my favorites. Again, a stable where they have one unique image, they look unified, but each individual one has their own unique image and their own unique style. And I think if you can stand out but still look unified, it's a great team. And as I've mentioned, I love teams in wrestling. I think it elevates everybody. It creates just a much better sporting feel, a much more interesting dynamic for story to unfold when people are in teams. And of course, I will shout out another Joshi promotion because Joshi are very underrated.
Mm-hmm.
It's where you should go if you're a wrestler and steal all your moves from because they're super innovative, but nobody's ever seen them. Oedo Tai, Fukigun Death, I think we mentioned before, but everything from the Kagetsu era up till now, they're still brilliant now with Starlight Kid and Momo Watanabe, and they had a fantastic feud with Queen's Quest just last year. But Kagetsu and Hazuki and Hanakamura, fantastic back then as well. And again, they have one unified image, but each person looks super individual, and their entrances for all three of those factions are absolutely fantastic.
Hoping that answered the question, is it?
Yeah, I guess the answer is Oedo Tai because they are still going.
There you go.
They are still running right now. But the other two, less so.
Last one up I've got here from Harvey. Let's have a look what he's saying, so I've had to put it all on my phone. Which wrestler would you want to have another match with in 2024? So I'm guessing someone you've wrestled prior that you want to have another go at. Honest George.
Yeah, I mean, George is obviously right at the top of the list. Not just because I deserve that title shot. I'm now, I think, 9-0 against 2.0 people at Kamikaze. What more do I have to do? But also because I've just loved the progression of wrestling George. Because we wrestled really early on, and we pretty much wrestled like every year. So it's something that sets the bar and the standard for how we've both progressed over the years. So realistically, I want to wrestle him once a year for my whole career and have just this long-running upgrade. Other than that, I'm really interested by some of the newer people. I'd love to wrestle people who I probably wrestled their first or second match after they've gone and got a bit more experience. And that's not just from Kamikaze. So I know we've got people in Kamikaze like Blake Violet, Tiger Shah. Edgar and Nate.
Great performance in DPW. Would have been Friday. Yeah, Tiger Shah. Heard good things.
Yeah, fantastic. Edgar Adams and Nate Riley. I've wrestled them when they were really new, and I'd love to make sure I wrestle them again this year, sometime down the line when they've got all that experience under them. But down in Wales, there's a guy called King Devler who I wrestled when he was really new, and loads of potential there. So I'd love to see him. And then I think probably the person who I really need to meet this year is, and this is going to be someone you don't know because this is a down south rivalry, Man of Steel. He's really gelled as an opponent lately. And
you brought him up to me outside of
yeah. So he's the person who I feel I've really connected with as a rival last year. So I hope that doesn't die out and we get another one this year. But yeah, I am really into the people who I've wrestled for their first or second match ever, wrestling them a year down the line. Anyone who I've done that for, it would be really fascinating to see how far they've come.
Yeah, and the final thing, the question for me, when is the HCW bias going to debut? When is the tag team going to actually debut?
I think we're going with the name Hate Wrestle.
Hate Wrestle, there you go. It's so good.
And I have recently seen a match graphic of Team Hate Wrestle, but I don't want to
Just in
spoil
case it
it
doesn't
because
happen.
the promotion obviously has every right to change their mind, and they are the people who reveal spoilers. So I've not been given the rights, but there is Team Hate Wrestle, and I would answer that last question by saying, not just who do I most want to wrestle, who do I most want to team with? I can't believe I've never teamed with Luke Douglas. We clearly get along at Cammy. We've both teamed with everybody else, MJ Grayson, Samuel Hughes, Will Stevens. We've all teamed with all the other people who are sort of similar to us, and yet we've literally never been on the same team. And you could see, even in the sixth way at Over the Top, we hit a few combination offenses. It seems like crazy that we've never been on the same team. So hopefully, Team Hate Wrestle 2024, it's happening.
Yeah, if the year happens, I'm turning up with in a suit with a tennis racket. That's what but yeah, we should now get back. Well, we technically were still speaking about wrestling, but we'll get back to yourself, just you. So after the pandemic, you kind of sprouted out a bit more. So you got to wrestle post CPW. I think the first place was Full Force. Is it Full Force? Full Force. It is Full Force. I keep thinking it's a different name every time I look at it. Yeah. How did that come about?
So this basically stays from the Wrestling and Hinckley family tree almost. It was Jason Joshua, who a real close friend, good running buddy. We actually appear on lots of not the same shows. Worded that horrifically, but you probably don't know how often we see each other in training. We are two training buddies, probably twice a week, even though pretty much every show in the Midlands is going to have one of us on. Not that many shows have both of us on.
Yeah.
We are everywhere. I'm trying to just scroll down to see whether it was IWE or whether it was Full Force that was first. So
Full Force, September 11th, yeah. IWE was 25th of September.
So the Full Force show was through Jason Joshua. It was a place that had a new place to train, which I needed after leaving Cov. I still wanted to stay on my game and not just rest on my laurels. So I still wanted to get better. And it had a lot of people who I knew from Wrestling in Hinckley. So it seemed like an obvious choice. And it really became my second home in that all my friends were there. But then I also really wanted to push myself to do even better and break out. And then I got another second home of Kamikaze. And those two places, I get two totally different vibes and experiences from. But they both produce incredible shows. Full Force, if you've never seen Full Force, it has the blockbusters, it has the professionals, it brings in Brian Kendrick, it has Steve Savage, Joel Redman. It's absolutely stacked. Doug Williams. It's an incredible show from top to bottom, and it's not an easy show to get on. In fact, the show that you're referencing was just a sort of carnival show that they did, and it was a proving ground for me rather than a full debut. And when I finally did get a full debut, they let's talk about the eras again. I mentioned the first era was all classic wrestling. The second era was a bit of Attitude Era. The third era was far more of what people would call indie wrestling, and it was the chance where I think I got to do a lot more explosive moves and athleticism. I took up gymnastics to try and keep up with everybody and really upgrade my game. But Full Force recognised the technical skill, and the first time I actually got on their proper show was a Rounds World of Sport match, which was really, really fun to do.
Yeah, against Chris Rolls, the Mad Hatter, I believe he goes by. A lot of the times. And then you kind of got to travel out. You said IWE, Prize Wrestling as well, which is a kind of offshoot of PWL because of the Chris Royal link. How was it kind of knowing that you get on these shows now?
I mean, at the time, it was actually still quite nerve-wracking because I didn't know, having left a place that likes to run people down and doesn't really encourage you to be your best, I had no clue where I actually was on the level of British independent pro wrestling. I had no clue how good or not good I was. I had George and Lucia telling me I was good enough, but I didn't know. I had to go and prove it to myself. I was very lucky to wrestle Chris Royals for my first Full Force match because he ran his own show and he immediately saw potential in me, and that's how the prize match came along because I wrestled the promoter, which is always lucky. IWE, I was brought down there by my friend Kevin Isaac, who I actually wrestled on that show. And he's somebody who isn't around anymore, but really was a fantastic wrestler who I'd met at Cov Pro, but he left during the pandemic and the way they were still running shows he didn't agree with. So again, everyone falls out with them eventually. I was really impressed by his understanding of psychology in the ring, and I really wanted to see more of him, and he took me down to IWE, and eventually that would lead to BCD and a bunch of other shows down south. So just sometimes it's just luck, but also I realized that actually anyone who did watch me wrestle wanted me on their show. So I was obviously doing a few things right.
Yeah, which is definitely a positive. And I'm going to bring it up now because he's like a character of the UK side. Mad Dog Max, how's it to wrestle him?
Fantastic. So the first time I wrestled Mad Dog was for a place called New Star Pro Wrestling, and they told me I'd never met him, and they told me, we really want you to wrestle this guy, but here's what we want. We don't want you to meet. Don't want you to have met or have spoken a single word.
Okay.
You will meet him for the first time in the ring.
God, yeah.
You'll get changed in different rooms. You'll go to the ring. No game plan whatsoever. You won't. I don't want you to scout any footage. He won't. He'll do the same for you. You two will have never seen each other. Go into the ring and put on a match. That match is on YouTube. If you think it's the I've wrestled him a bunch of times, but I think the one that's on YouTube, Alex Connors versus Mad Dog Max. The first time I ever met him was in the ring. He has this old British style, which I was adept at from Robbie Brookside school, and I absolutely loved getting into the roots and getting into the history and the way wrestling was. It's very exciting. I love doing the new style with the young, fresh Kamikaze 2.0 and the exciting Full Force. Anyone who's ever seen Joey Scott wrestle, who's the Full Force promoter and trainer, he's one of the most athletic people you'll ever see. Kamikaze's full of the most athletic people you'll ever see. But to go and actually do a technical match with someone who understands British wrestling and just meet him for the first time in the ring was a really great experience. And I've met him plenty of times since then, including Wrestle Carnival.
Which superb, Mad Dog Max. I just like how he has an old school style, but he can wrestle like Terry Funk at sometimes as well. He's just like perfect kind of wrestler.
That's a person who just loves the history of wrestling, and so do I. And that's what you love to see.
Yeah, that's the mold you need.
Hey, you. Yeah, you. Do you like this video? There is a button. It's a very sexy button. It says subscribe on it. I wish I could click on it, but YouTube won't let me. Damn fuckers.
You've brought up it a bit early with the coalition and so forth. When the foundations of the Temple of Light and how it's become like the mainstay of you at the moment, how's that come along properly?
Yeah, this is a crazy story to begin with, because a lot of people will know the Temple of Light who are watching this, I assume. They'll probably know me, Lenny Lynch, Leighton LeBlanc, and Kiara. I think that's the main block that people would recognise. You're going to get a lot of Kamikaze fans who don't know any of those, because Kamikaze is just myself. But predominantly, you'll recognise those four if you're watching this. And it didn't start out that way at all. We had, at Full Force, a few people had... There was no good, strong tag team scene in the Midlands at the time. There was one or two good teams, but there wasn't a good tag team scene. And the tag team title belts at Full Force had really diminished. I know we'd said this about title belts in WWE when they didn't mean as much as they once did. You know, the Gunter and the IC title, he's made it mean so much more, but it's gone through periods where it was not on pay-per-views or nobody cared about it. So the Full Force tag team titles had reached that point, and I said, give me a shot of these belts, and I promise I'll win them, and I'll make them matter on Full Force shows. And I said to Joey Scott, the promoter, team me with anybody. this is a true story. I said, team me with anybody, let me have a title shot, and I promise I'll win those belts and I'll make them matter and I'll make them really important to Full Force again. And he teamed me with Sebastian Knight.
Yeah.
And Sebastian Knight had also been teaming in the past with Damian Black. And that is actually the first Temple of Light right there.
Okay.
And me and Sebastian Knight clicked immediately. He's not a person I would have picked. I wouldn't if Joey Scott had said choose a partner, Sebastian Knight probably wouldn't be there. Probably Kevin Isaac at the time would have been there. Or Lenny Lynch and Leighton LeBlanc. We're good friends, but I would not have picked Sebastian Knight. We gelled instantly. I think he is probably the person who was the most I've ever had that unspoken connection with a tag team partner. And we just immediately did so much better than I could have possibly hoped. The Temple of Light took off. He would appear at Hinckley. We'd team there. We started getting on other shows as a pair. We were the champions for a really long time. And I mean, Damian Black was around as more of the third, the swapping in and out, freebird sort of rule. But me and Sebastian Knight were the mainstay tag team. And if you look at the title defenses or just other Temple of Light matches, we were equals and we wrestled very frequently everywhere. It wasn't just me who founded the Temple of Light. It was me and Sebastian Knight. But eventually Damian Black would retire. Sebastian Knight would have a kid and need to spend a lot of time.
Outrageous.
And very, very fair, very reasonable. He didn't leave that to his partner. He got very stuck in. And so it did leave me by myself for a while. And that is when we had an absolute shocking moment where two of the hooded monks who regularly accompany me to the ring actually turned out to be two of Full Force's fan favourites, Lenny Lynch and Leighton LeBlanc, and they would replace Sebastian and Damien, and you'd get the configuration that you know now. Even though we do have people jump in and out, we have had a lot of people who... The Temple of Light is a huge organisation. We see the monks all the time. It's a place where you can go. It is down the road here from my house. There's an actual building. If you see our promos, there is an actual building, the Temple of Light. It's not just a figment of our imagination. I can give you an address and we can go there. And it's full of people, but obviously not all those people are wrestlers. We just use wrestling to promote the message. There's a lot of civilians and regular people who are just there making the world a better place. But it does mean that you see the roster change all the time. But we then form that mainstay of me, Lenny Lynch, Leighton LeBlanc, and Kiara. For those who don't know Kiara, because she hasn't come up before, she also trained under Robbie Brookside with myself and Lenny Lynch all those years ago. So it's a bit of a reunion.
She's very underrated as well. Like, I think I brought it up to you because I didn't realise she was linked to you again because everyone's linked to you, it seems. When I think I saw her on a Brawl show and she was like the complete standout of the whole show. And I was like, why is no one mentioning this person? Very, very good. You held the tag titles for 421 days, defended them 4 or 5 times within the company, and you lost them against the Chris Royals and Mad Max, who've held it longer, but they've had less defences. So they've gone full Dean Ambrose. That's what I'm going with. That.
Yeah.
Well, they've had one defence, thinking about it, because the first match was beating you guys. So.
Yeah, exactly. They've dodged a lot of defences, including against a rematch of sorts when they were supposed to defend those belts against Lenny Lynch and Leighton LeBlanc, but they are no-showed because they obviously feared the Temple of Light.
It's a bad start, isn't it? 498 days, one defence. And then we might as well stick on this, even though it's kind of slightly out the timeline, but it's better to kind of talk about Full Force in one go. You are the current Barracks Academy champion.
Yeah.
You're getting to the longest reigning as well, yeah.
Honestly, just a real honour to represent Full Force because it's the place that gave me the joy, gave me the love of wrestling back after what had been a real wear down in the previous places. I went to Full Force and I had a great time. I learned a lot because Joey Scott is only fantastic. He's one of the hardest working
he's
wrestlers.
Good, isn't he, Joey Scott?
Yeah, and I think he wrestled the most out of any wrestler in Europe one year, and he is just incredible. So I learned a lot, but also I had loads of fun. Full Force is an absolute blast of a school. where everyone's just that big family vibe, and it gave me that love of wrestling. So as soon as I loved Full Force, I wanted to represent them. I wanted to win that title that they have there. The Barracks belt is not just it's called the Barracks belt because it is the home belt. It's not the belt that every person can just walk in. It's the belt for your regulars and your mainstays, not your special attractions. And that is really important for Full Force to have that level of up and comers and great wrestlers, and for me to be the testing iron for those people.
Yeah, and you have been, and I've just had a look at your defences. You fought, which not a lot of people would know, Dan Splash, who was on the original Kamikaze shows, which is kind of really a random throwback there.
Yeah, I wouldn't know that. If I have one weakness in my wrestling nerddom, it's the Kamikaze history, because a lot of people think I've been there for a long time and always quote things that happened before my Kamikaze time, and I never have a clue what happened before I was there.
Probably happened. But yeah, he just randomly threw me when I saw his name. I hadn't seen his name in a while. But yeah, you are current champion. You defended it more recently in a ladder match, which is an incredible feat against people like Jason Joshua and Thierry Dacted. It nearly happened.
It was a 5-way ladder match, and then I went and wrestled and defended another belt later that same day.
You're pretty good at wrestling, Alex.
And then I appeared the next day to wrestle Sonny Noss, I believe, in front of your very eyes. That was a Sunday, right?
Yes, and also, I don't know if this is just... You're still the Influence champion. Is that...
Still the Influence champion, that is correct. Yeah, that is correct.
That's got to be like your longest reigning now, surely.
I felt sure the Influence belt would be the one that would cost me my stat of always holding belts for longer than before, but hasn't happened yet.
Oh, yeah, because you got it 500 days. So, I think you're... Because the next one, just for people, I think 127 days, which is Hassan, so, you're 3 times the guy that owns the title. But we will now get onto a place where I started to know you from, and that's the reason you come on our show a lot. Kamikaze, how did you get into Kamikaze?
Yeah, so I knew all my friends at Full Force, but George and Lucia were telling me about a place where I could try and get further up the British wrestling scene and really push myself, push my athleticism, get fitter with the cardio, which is legendary at Kamikaze. Yeah. And so I started training at both places, and obviously because they're professional places, that was encouraged, not frowned upon. I wrestled at both places and had an absolute blast at both for totally different reasons. Kamikaze has been a place where I push my own athleticism and cardio, and I get to meet people. I wrestled Simon Miller. I wrestled people who have been imported in, and also a place where I can really help the newer people coming up, which is probably what most people will know me from, is wrestling 2.0 people. But recently, it's been an honor to be added to the coaching staff of those 2.0 people and to be in the Kamikaze dojo regularly teaching and training, which is a whole new aspect to my career.
There's a lot of people now, isn't there? I saw the dojo starter days, whatever they call it. There was like 500 people in there. Luke had to stand on the top rope.
It's incredible. In the centre of Birmingham, we have a building that's open basically every day, running a different class. And that is just a hub of wrestlers and wrestling and knowledge that I wanted to be involved in. And I wanted to get on those shows because they open doors to lots of other shows, because the standard is so high to get on Kamikaze. You cannot just walk in or ask. You've got to be very good to get on Kamikaze. Yeah. So once you're on that show, it proves to a lot of other promoters that you are of a certain level, and it opens a lot of doors. So I wanted to be as many places as possible. So I carried on Full Force, and I went to Kamikaze at the same time. And I was told it would be a really difficult, and the cardio obviously was something I pushed myself. I went to gymnastics to keep up with some of their more athletic people. I looked at some of the offense and thought, I've never been Spanish flied in my life, but if it happens now, I'm going to break both my shoulders. So I need to get more athletic. And these days, you would see moves from me that you would never see. I did a springboard helo against Sonny Noss in that match, which is something that CPW me would never have been able to perform. I was much more of a technical brawler back then, and these days I can keep up with the high flyers and get a different style from Full Force.
Yeah, you debuted against Samuel Hughes, who's obviously having a resurgence right now. And you've been on every show since, haven't you? Live wise, I don't think you've skipped one at any point that I can see.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I haven't been on every single show since because for Frostfight, I was away. I was away for a whole month in a different country, so I missed that one main roster show. But other than that, I think I've appeared at every single show, although that will be broken this very week, or at least altered slightly, because we're doing a 2.0 only tournament. You will see me there, but sat on the commentary desk with a headset on. So Cage Match probably won't tell you about that, but I'm very excited because it's a whole new level to bring up the 2.0 guys.
It's also good for me because it means you can watch all the action, so the review's going to be decent.
Review's going to be amazing.
But yeah, you've wrestled literally everyone academy-wise and beat them. You beat George. We'll remember that in a minute. It's just fantastic. And you mentioned, I think, like he doesn't get enough credit because he's kind of a silent partner kind of thing. But Marshall X trained a lot of the people that you see today, like Luke Douglas, man like DeReese. People like that, which I feel like that because he doesn't like the credit, but he trained a lot of the people that are around now. Samuel Hughes,
and he pushed me to try things I never would have tried before, and I'm very grateful for that. And it's really helped me develop my game. Like I said, I sort of merged all my stars together, and I tried to be the best version of me. But that was really helped by Marshall X and Joey Scott at these two training schools. And Marshall X, he would add stuff to my repertoire that I didn't think was possible.
He can invent stuff, Marshall X. It just out of nowhere will go, we'll try this move where it's like a DVD, but we're going to spin them into a cutter and and we're like, what?
Yeah.
I'm a
so
guy.
Innovative. So I hit this combination quite frequently now, this sort of springboard swanton into a Blue Thunder. Entirely Marshall X's idea.
Yeah.
Entirely Marshall X's idea. He's really innovative. He's just one of the best for a long time because Kamikaze is one of the most important mainstays of British wrestling for a long time.
Yeah.
On that independent level.
Like I said, it's because he doesn't take. He's pretty much in the shadows, Marshall X.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, I'm shouting him out. Deal with it. But yeah, so more recent times we get into at this point. So we've discussed it a few times. You are the real Kamikaze Pro World Live Champion. It doesn't say out in Cage Match because they're liars. But when is this title match happening? When are you going to actually claim it?
See, I've got to, again, give credit to Marshall X for giving me the huge belief and loads of opportunities at Kamikaze. I wrestled Cage Jutler like really early on, and Marshall X brought me in, and a lot of people told me the show was hard to get on, and it was. And a lot of people told me that I'd have to push myself and you'd end up getting battered. But actually, Marshall X, I think, has shown so much faith and belief to give me loads of opportunities and use me to the best I could possibly be utilised and to give me all these chances. Unfortunately, there's also a GM, Carl Robinson, who doesn't seem to care about wins and losses, who doesn't seem to care about
ego.
Earning the title shots. He just wants to give his favourite little pet projects title belts, and I have no influence over that. So who knows when that rematch is happening.
It's a sad affair. And before we wrap up, I didn't really have it questioned down, but I feel like we should mention it because you wrestle there a lot, and you are the pure title holder, I believe. TTW, Top Turnbuckle Wrestling, they're a new brand that've only come out last year.
Yeah. I mean, I wrestled for 20 promotions last year, which is
there was a lot.
It's
hard to go through them all.
It's hard to go through them all, and I don't want to miss any out, so I will shout out how good a lot of them are before I then talk about TTW, which is sort of a newer passion project. But I don't want anyone to feel left out because I really appreciate every single show that's put me on. Like I said, even when I've complained about some shows, they're still giving me opportunities. You cannot be a wrestler by yourself. You need a crowd, a ring, opponents. So every promotion that's ever had me on, I'm hugely grateful to. So recently, DCW has been a huge one that's put me in a lot of fun chances. There's a match we had with the Temple of Light against Joey Scott and Steve Valentino, which was one of my favourite matches of last year. Balcony dive moonsault from Joey Scott in that match.
What were you going to say? You
incredible.
Then?
No, not me.
I was going to say.
I would again, shout out IWE for being one of the few places to bring me in and believe in me when I'd really just started getting out there. BCD, who paired me up in that rivalry with Man of Steel. Fantastic little hidden gem down south that's just a great show. Brawl and EVM are shows that have put me on. Phenomenal Elite had me on. Wrestle Carnival were let me perform in a great environment. I had a few matches with them just before they closed, unfortunately. So I got on a few shows and then they shut down. But huge crowd, and in the HCW Empire, which is a beautiful arena. So I want to obviously a huge thank you to them. And I'm going to mention one that's closed, even though you can't go and watch it now. But Wolfram Pro Wrestling, they let me do their last ever match, which I thought was an interesting decision because I hadn't been there that long. But then we took the ring down as the match progressed, and it was a real symbolic and fascinating match that had some great moments. Redacted got involved. It was beautiful. APW is a show that's an absolute cult hit in Telford. Great show is APW if you live anywhere near Telford. The crowd are rabid. Mm-hmm. That's a show we probably should have brought up earlier, but we just don't have time to mention everybody.
You wrestle everywhere, Alex, unfortunately.
I know, but I want to give everyone credit because they're incredible. We mentioned Prize. I've done a few shows down in Wales lately, which has let me team with the Temple of Light a lot more. And we had some great brawls there. PEW and UKWA put me on last year and gave me great opponents. Okay, I really just want to say thank you to any promotion because you couldn't wrestle without them. TTW is where I hold another belt.
Before we go into that, though, as well, you had, I think you posted online, you were one of the most wrestled UK guys, weren't you? If I remember, there was a stat as well.
Yeah, I think it was 7th on Cage Match. And Cage Match does miss a few things. I think even for me, I did maybe 6 matches that aren't recorded there. And I'm sure other people will say, oh, I did a bunch of matches that weren't recorded on Cage Match. And I appreciate that, but it's the best source. It's the best source we got, isn't it? It's the best reference you can have. And on that, I think I was the 7th hardest working wrestler in Europe last year, beaten by Joey Scott. So fair enough. And also Jason Joshua, who I think was just one space behind me. So me and him again really help push each other. We always do. He's a great person to have in your corner. And I'm always in his corner. So yeah, it was an incredible stat to see myself as the 7th most booked wrestler in Europe, according to Cage Match.
Yeah. Cage Match said it's the one I use, so that's what I'll go with.
Yeah, people do tell me, oh, but it might be inaccurate or people might have done more. And I go, sure, but what else can I base it on?
That's all I are looking at. It says it on there. I'm not going to argue with it.
Yeah, and I've got no other record. I've got no database that's more accurate. So I've just got to base it off that. And it was a real surprise and big honor and a real confidence boost.
Yeah, and hopefully it continues this year. But back now to TTW.
Now let's say how good TTW is. Yeah, a rather new passion project. Their fans are absolutely rabid because they have basically split away from a previous company. I don't know anything about what happened there, but they have just formed this. And I thought they'd have a core loyal fan base. But actually, when you go there, they have one of the biggest fan bases I've seen. They are very rabid. They're very loyal. And we've been able to bring in the whole Temple of Light and create these real dramatic and important moments. And it's been really fun and exciting to get stuck in there and do things with the media side. We've been, if you're not plugged into TTW social media events, then you need to be, because things change left, right, and centre in the background. Every time there's a podcast, it could lead to something big. And that's been really exciting and a fun new passion project with just creative and open-minded people. So I'm looking forward to see where they go and where they grow. There's not much more to say about TTW.
Yeah, well, but quite new. Someone got
you need to go check it out. You need to go check it out.
Yeah, one of them messaged me, I can't remember who it was, and said you should check them out. And it happens every time I'm going to. It falls on either I'm already at a show, or I'm on a work day and it's kind of hard to get down. But I definitely will check, because I checked out, there's got one in April coming up, so I'm going to try and go.
And you're down at Wrestling in Hinckley as well?
Yes, I am Wrestling Hinckley, yeah. Pro Kamikaze, it's a strong weekend next week. It's Kamikaze Pro, then Wrestling Hinckley, and then there's the Revolution Pro in Coventry if I really wanted to go down there.
Yeah, Wrestling in Hinckley has one of the, again, most rabid and loyal fan bases, and it's the only place currently where you'll see a hometown crowd cheer Alex Connors unabatedly and unashamedly, and that is a whole unique and fascinating experience. And one of the people I would have put on my list to wrestle this year would be CJ Rawlings, but I've got him at this upcoming Wrestling in Hinckley, so that wish has already been granted.
Which we'll be previewing. Because there's matches to preview now. And mention as well, first Wrestling Hinckley show I went to, you became an Iron Man. Went from number 1 in a Rumble to number 30. So, fantastic.
Yeah, that is one of those experiences that I think every wrestler has on their bucket list, but very few will get the opportunity to do. So it was, I would like to say it was an honor and a privilege, but it was a lot of hard work is what it was. It was very sweaty. I wrestled a match already.
Yeah. It was going to be a
very
match.
Yeah, very intense match already. I've been powerbombed off the top. And then still shown up number 1 in this Rumble and went all the way and won it.
Yep, getting stopped by Mia Cortez.
Yeah, absolutely battered. And that ladder match you mentioned previously, 5-way ladder match from last weekend, I think that was the first time I'd won a ladder match. That was another tick off the bucket list. I've been in a few.
Coming together. So, one final question we ask on everyone. So, dream opponent of someone that's wrestling now, still up and able, and then a dream opponent of someone that's either retired or they've unfortunately passed.
Yeah, dead easy questions. Alex Shelley, he is my all-time favourite wrestler. When I first started watching wrestling, I first saw Alex Shelley, and every match he would do a different style, and they would all be amazing. I'd watch him wrestle Bryan Danielson in a technical masterpiece. Then he'd go to TNA and wrestle the Luchas, and he'd keep up with them. He'd wrestle Shocker in the opener. Then he'd wrestle Jay Lethal, and it would be an indie. And then he'd wrestle with the Motor City Machine Guns, and they'd reinvent tag team wrestling. Alex Shelley is the most diverse style of wrestler I'd ever seen, and he is my favourite wrestler of all time, and he is still wrestling today. So that's answer number 1. Answer number 2, I feel very ashamed that I haven't mentioned a Japanese wrestler, so I'm going to give 2 answers. I'm going to give an American and Japanese. Rick Rude for my American answer.
Well, that's a good one. No one normally says Rick. That's a good one. I like that.
So underrated, so understanding of getting into your opponent's head, so good in the ring. Just fantastic in the ring.
What you really want, you want your face on his trunks. That's what you want. That's what you really want.
I do. Yeah, I just think everything he did was ahead of its time. I think it's so underrated. And for Japan, I mean, I'm an absolute New Japan obsessive, and I always have been. It's probably the company I've been most invested in, that or Ring of Honor, over the years. But realistically, these days, I go and find myself watching mostly Kawada matches, which seems like an obvious answer because he is one of the 4 pillars. He's a legend. But those matches are just phenomenally good. Kawada Kobashi, Kawada Misawa, just unbelievably good. So he'd have to be on the list. But also, so would Jushin Liger. Just an icon, a legend, game-changing wrestler. Yeah, I could carry on listing New Japan Junior Heavyweights. I was obsessed with the Best of Super Juniors when I got into wrestling. I'd watch every single match from every single Best of Super Juniors tournament and try and create new innovative offense from that. But let's just choose Liger as the pinnacle.
Yeah, just he sums up the whole thing, doesn't he? But that is it, everyone. That is an indie spotlight on Alex Connors. I haven't mentioned them because this is about you, and we've had a video prior to this come out. We've got new graphics, everyone. Yay! And a new intro. Thank you to MJ Grayson's band, A Titan and a Deity, for allowing us to do the intro. I believe that's their name, and now I'm second guessing myself. So I'm going to quickly YouTube it and edit it out if it's not. And if it is, I'm not going to edit this because it makes me look even worse. It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I was right. I'm glad. It was the worst thing, the first ever shout out, if I got their name wrong. But yeah, so as usual, like and subscribe. We've got more UK spotlights coming out. We've got Josh Crane coming on from America. And maybe Eric Dillinger as well, which is nice. And then we'll be looking in the UK and finding the next person we're going to do it on. But yeah, like and subscribe. Alex's Instagram's down below. His Twitter that he loves very much is below that on the description, so you'll only see it there. Anything else you want to shill, Alex?
Yeah.
Anything you'd like to shill, Alex?
No, I'm not going to come on here and do a shill. Just a huge thank you to everyone who comes and watches us at shows. We've got some great fans. We've got some loyal fans at every show. But if you haven't, just come and check one out, because a local indie show can often be an experience you could never get from a mainstream show, and support your local British independents, whoever they are.
There we go. That's a nice somber way of doing the end of this. So I've got one final question that you were surprise question. Is Sonny Nos a cat?
Sonny Nos is 100% not a cat.
Goodbye, everyone.